Hey, so I'm going to make a real short video about, there's this post on Facebook from 100.7 The Viper that is saying, and they've had other scooping news supposedly, I don't remember what the last one they said was, but supposedly they have these inside sources that they will never name, and blah blah blah. Anyways, the post says, interesting, from our sources who were 100% accurate on the autopsy info, Mike Brown's DNA was found on Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson's gun, face, and hands. Ferguson officer Darren Wilson's DNA was found on Mike Brown's hands and arms. So I want to address this because this whole time, since they haven't released a police report, they haven't released a picture of his so-called injuries, I've said from get-go that these people are doing everything that they can to cover it up. And now that they have this audio of the actual gunfire shots, and it's been authenticated by the people who make the app the guy was using, saying that the time was 12:02 or whatever time, but it fits in exactly with the time that he was shot. So that's now been confirmed. So the FBI is going to confirm that, and that's going to be proven to be real. So I've said from the very get-go that this is nothing but a cover-up, and they haven't released anything because they're getting all their ducks in the row to make sure that they cover every one of their tracks to try to prove that Darren Wilson didn't murder Mike Brown. Even though from the very beginning, all the eyewitnesses have come out and said that Mike Brown had his hands up and was surrendering, and if you listen to those, to the audio recording of the gunshots, you hear the 4 shots or whatever it is, 6 shots, and then there's a 3-second pause, and then 4 more shots. So if that's true, that Mike Brown was sitting there with his hands up, at any point, if he had put his hands up in surrendering motion, that means that the cop then went ahead and executed him. That makes him guilty of murder. That's enough for him to have been at least charged without going to a grand jury and without having to go through all this rigmarole of everything that they've put the citizens of Ferguson through and whatnot. But you have this prosecutor whose dad was killed by a black man who was a police officer 50 years ago, and we all know that man is not going to do his vigorous job to defend Mike Brown in the grand jury, which is secret. So we're not going to know what happens in the grand jury. If the grand jury comes back and says that they're not going to charge him, then we're never, well, at that point we would find out what happened in the grand jury because then it can be released. But up until that point, we're not going to. And if they come out and say that they're not going to charge him, it's always going to be questioned whether that prosecuting attorney vigorously presented all of the evidence that he possibly could have presented. So I've said from the very beginning that this has been a cover-up, and if in fact Mike Brown's DNA was found on police officer Darren Wilson's gun, face, and hands, that is information that you would think the police would have wanted to show to the public immediately to calm the tension in that city. But no, this comes out now, almost 3 weeks after this has happened, that supposedly his DNA was found on his face, guns, and hands. So, like I've said from the beginning, this is nothing but a cover-up. And if in fact it is reported by mainstream media that his blood and DNA was found on his gun, face, and hands, that's because they planted it there. And I will say that until the day I die. The Ferguson Police Department has done everything they can to demonize Mike Brown, ignore the eyewitnesses, and try to make this seem like Darren Wilson did nothing wrong. When in fact, he executed a guy. He shot him once in the face and once in the top of the head, not to mention the other 4 shots. So if that police officer was so afraid for his life, instead of finishing him off and executing him, why didn't he get in his car and call for backup? Why didn't he do any of that? We don't see him at the scene with blood on his face. We don't see him wiping anything off. We don't even see him grabbing his face like he's been injured. The cop, a chief DA or something, took him to the hospital later, which is, if he does have injuries, which I will always say that somebody punched him in the face from the police department, but we will never know. At this point, it is nothing but a huge cover-up, and if he's not charged with murder, it's going to get even uglier in Ferguson, most likely. So this is on, like I said, 100.7 The Viper, which I guess is a radio station in St. Louis, on their Facebook page. So take that for a grain of salt, but they have been, evidently they have some inside source that's been leaking them information, and they've been posted on their Facebook page. So beyond that, if you read in the comments, there's a comment by a guy named Kevin Price, who's the first one under there, or the top one. I don't know how Facebook rates their comments. But anyways, this guy, Kevin Price, says, I got confirmation from a law enforcement officer that Dorian Johnson, and what he really meant was Dorian, I forget what his last name is. Maybe it is Johnson. I don't remember. But Dorian, Mike Brown's friend who was with him, is true, meaning that Dorian has flipped his story, saying the opposite of what he said before. So he's saying, I got a good explanation on why Mike Brown's body was left out in the open for so long. And then somebody asked him why, and he says, okay, St. Louis County does not have many medical examiners on staff during the weekends. They were all at a multiple fatality traffic accident at the time of the shooting occurred, hence the wait. So supposedly St. Louis County had sent all of their medical examiners to one car wreck that had multiple fatalities and couldn't send it to the shooting death of Mike Brown. So they left him out there for 4 hours. Bullshit. It's just more of the cover-up. I will say it until the day I die, and I don't care. The Ferguson Police Department is doing everything that they can to cover this up so Darren Wilson can walk away with $500,000 that all these racist fucking pigs have donated to him, and that he can be the new hero of the white supremacy party. And it's getting really ridiculous, but I just wanted to share that because I found it quite interesting that this radio station, who obviously, if they are getting this, then somebody's leaking it to them. You know, it's not going through the proper channels, so somebody in the law enforcement community isn't doing their job and needs to be investigated and look to see who's leaking this stuff to this investigator or to this website. So that's what I wanted to bring up, and I'd be interested to hear what other people say. I 100% believe that these people are covering up and there is no other explanation for it, because the witnesses came out, you know, from the get-go. People from that neighborhood. He had his hands up. There's been 5 people now that have went on the news who have all given remarkably similar stories that, you know, there may have been a tussle at the truck and that may have been cause for arrest and whatnot. But if at any point Michael Brown put his hands up and was surrendering and then was executed, that is murder. It doesn't matter what happened at the truck. It doesn't matter what happened at the gas station where he supposedly took the cigars. All of that is irrelevant. When you put your hands up in surrendering, and there's a 3-second pause, and then you hear 4 more shots, and we know that 2 of them went in the head and 1 in the eye, that is murder. Plain and simple. I don't care if the motherfucker has blood all over his goddamn body. He murdered that kid, and the Ferguson Police Department is doing everything that they can, and it seems like now, probably along with the St. Louis County Police Department and the District Attorney's Office, is doing everything that they possibly can to cover this up. And it's really a fucking shame that nobody in this world believes that, you know, any black person's life has any value, and that racist tree people, you know, they're doing everything they can, digging up all this dirt to find out, you know, about Mike Brown. And they say, you know, well, what about the kid in Utah who was white that was shot by, you know, a black cop or whatever? The point is, they don't care that people are shot by cops. They don't care if the cop is white, whatever. They don't care who the cops shoot. The fact is, in this case of Mike Brown, just like in Trayvon, they don't care that George Zimmerman was half white, half Hispanic. They don't care about that. What they care about is the fact that a black kid or a black person was killed. That's their end game. They are racist. They will do anything in the world, even if Darren Wilson was black. They would have defended him because they enjoy when black people are killed. It doesn't matter if it's by rogue neighborhood watch people or if it's by licensed police officers. They do not care. What they care about is seeing black people murdered. That is what they enjoy. That is their pastime. This racist tree people, they're saying they have viewed thousands of hours of videotape and whatnot. This happened 3 weeks ago. If we only assume that thousands means 2,000, 2,000 divided by 24 hours in a day is 83 days. So they're saying they have viewed 83 days minimum worth of video to come to all of their far out fucking conclusions and all their Google map images and all this bullshit. But yet in their comments, they comment about how all these protesters didn't have jobs and how they could be out protesting all this. If you've reviewed 83 days worth of video in 20 days, that means you had to have 4 people on it full time that don't have jobs doing it all day fucking long. Or you had to have 8 people on it doing it half a day. Or you had to have 16 people on it doing it a portion of the day. Those motherfuckers must not have jobs either. But yet you see that it's okay for them to sit on the internet and do this research for hours and hours and hours and hours. And nobody questions them. Nobody questions, when the fuck are you going to work, motherfucker? But yet they have a problem with these protesters who are out protesting, for the most part at night, out protesting when these people are sitting there for 24 hours a fucking day, must be hopped up on coffee and heroin and meth and whatever else they can coke, whatever else they can get to keep themselves awake, so they can go over this video footage, this thousands of hours of video footage for, 24 hours a fucking day. That's their mentality. They will do anything they can, up until including never sleeping, to find anything they can to demonize the dead black kid and the witnesses that support the dead black kid, but they won't do 5 minutes worth of research to find out that Darren Wilson came from a fucking broken home, and then his mom was a convicted felon, and then he was fired from the racist police department was shut down, and he had to be transferred to Ferguson. None of that will ever come into their thinking, because they don't care about none of that. What they care about is that a black kid was dead, and there is always justification for killing a black kid. It doesn't matter what it is, it's the fact that he was black and he deserved to die. And the Ferguson Police Department is doing everything that they can to cover this up, and it's really fucking sad. And I hope Ferguson makes it through this. I hope they don't break out and riot, and I hope, all of that. But if the grand jury comes back and they decide not to indict, I really, feel sorry for that community, because it's not right. Again, they're just getting validation that, to them, or to the police officers there, and to a lot of the rest of the world, the Sean Hannitys, the Bill O'Reillys, the Megyn Kellys, these people do not value human life. What they value is seeing a dead black person and the person who did it walking away. And if they're white, by God, even better. There's nothing that a white person can ever do that would not justify them killing that black person. Because to them, every black person is scary and dangerous and needs to be put down. And that's the world that we live in. And the internet has brought it out. These people live behind their, anonymous avatars and their screen names, and they say every fucking horrible racist thing in the world. And it's like we're living in the 1950s, like I said before. And it's just really sad. So I just wanted to bring this up about this post that's, now going to make the rounds of the internet, and you're going to start seeing it, that they're saying that, Mike Brown's DNA was all over Darren Wilson. And if it was, again, like I said, it's nothing but a cover-up, because these people will never, ever admit that that man executed him for no good reason. He could have kept his ass in the car. He had a radio to call for backup. If he's that afraid of the scary black man, just like the 2 police officers a couple of days after Mike Brown killed the guy in St. Louis, if you watch that videotape, there was no reason they had to shoot him. He had a knife. I mean, aren't these people trained in any other method to take people down other than deadly force? Is that their only means these days? And especially if you're black. There's the guy in Ohio who was in Walmart, who some woman said that he was brandishing a gun that ended up being a toy gun that was sold there in Walmart, and the cops just opened fire on him and killed him. And now the attorneys have viewed that videotape and said the cops came up, didn't do anything, just shot that motherfucker dead. Then there was a white man in Walmart in South Carolina today, or yesterday, I don't remember which, that went into a Walmart and tried to steal a register and was harassing customers and doing whatever he was doing. And the cops beat the fuck out of him and whatnot. But you notice they didn't shoot him. He's still alive to tell his story. One of the cops has been put on leave and whatever for excessive force and whatnot. But the point of the story is the white man is still alive. And every other black suspect is dead and asked questions later. And then cover up and do exactly what you can do to prove that your white officer did no wrong, or the white suspect did no wrong, and the black person was asking to die. It's just sick, and it's getting out of control. And anyone who wants to say that we don't live in a world that is very race divided is completely ignorant, wrong, and or racist. Because we do. We live in a very race divided world. Black people do not have the same opportunities that white people have. A big problem that we have is we fund schools with tax dollars. You don't find in black communities a lot of high dollar tax houses with property tax. So therefore, their schools get less money to be funded on. And, you know, in the white neighborhoods, you have $1 million houses, and these kids get every opportunity in the world. And people want to say that, you know, we don't have these race problems in the world. We still live in a 1950s era of segregation, whether people want to admit it or not. And the people who usually don't want to admit it are the white people who are very well off and have never seen a day of hard work in their life and have never had to struggle for anything and have never had to fight for any sort of right or, you know, anything like that. So it's really sad that this is the world we live in. I'm sorry I've rambled on for so long, but I wanted to bring this up about supposedly Mike Brown's DNA was all over, you know, Darren Wilson, and if it was, that's because they fucking planted it there. No doubt in my mind. Good night.